The global financial markets have been roiled by US President Donald Trump's tariffs and the multiple revisions, delays, as well as exemptions and muddied explanations that have come along with them from the president and his top economic advisors. Now, there's been extreme volatility as investors wonder if the most impactful tariffs will really happen. The White House insists that they will. In the meantime, uncertainty reigns. Today on Wall Street in early trading, we're sitting well into positive territory. Dow, NASDAQ and S&P well above that 0.5% mark in the green. And this is quite important because we've seen real pressure coming through. But the last few days, we've seen some reprieve. And again, it has to do with the messaging from the White House. Meantime, European stock markets are edging higher today after President Trump said he's considering those exemptions on auto tariffs. Here's a look at the major indices later in the trading day. As you can see, all in the green. The FTSE up 1.2% and the IBEX up almost 2%. Now, the EU announcing today it is going to impose retaliatory tariffs on hundreds of American products, ranging from clothing to toilet paper, if trade talks with the US fail. I want to bring in Nick Robertson from London. He's on top of the story for us. And Nick, frankly, the Europeans have said if things don't go as planned and there's no negotiation and deal on the table, they are willing to embark on countermeasures. So give me a sense of what is happening behind closed doors, what kind of conversations are occurring, and whether the US and the Europeans can see eye to eye.
Well, they saw eye to eye yesterday, quite literally, because their top trade commissioner was in Washington meeting with US counterparts. And he said, look, taking this opportunity of a 90-day pause on these US tariffs. President Trump had initially said 20% on Europe on horizontal tariffs, taking it down to 10%, holding it off for 90 days. OK. They're into these talks, but he did say this is going to be difficult. It's going to require both sides. And he also said that the tariffs were unfair. So he is back in Europe now, briefing ambassadors. This is how the EU works about the nature of and the result of and the content of those conversations. But what else is happening? And you just talked about it. Well, last week, the European Union took a decision on $23 billion worth of tariffs on the United States for OK, we've got to look at this very carefully here because it was 4 aluminum and steel tariffs that the US had announced back in February. That came about, this is your question about what's actually happening behind the scenes, coordination, conversations between the Commission and the constituent countries that make up the European Union. Everything is a discussion. Everything they say is done carefully. It's done, sort of to the agreement of all the different parties involved. So what you're talking about here, we got the details from the European Union today of the tariffs that they would have imposed today had President Trump last week not put a 90-day hold. The European Union saying this is what we would have targeted, this basket of goods, which includes, as you say, toilet paper, makeup. But that's not the end of it. What the European Union agreed to last week was a phased rollout of tariffs. So you have those tariffs that would have gone out today. They're on the 90-day pause. You have tariffs that would have gone out, 25% by the way, in May on beef, on other agriculture products, a graded pain threshold going up, if you will. And then in December, soybean, a massive export coming from the United States to the European Union. And no surprise, the European Union very carefully, this gets to what they're doing behind the scenes, looking at what they target. Soybeans produced, a lot of them coming from Louisiana. Louisiana's a red state. This is the European Union signaling that it's trying to sort of get to the, if you will, the producers of these products who might have a political influence on President Trump's thinking. That's the calculus. But here's another point. OK, so there's those 10% horizontal tariffs plus the 25% vehicle car tariffs that the United States has imposed on the European Union and the rest of the world as well. There hasn't been a response, reciprocal tariffs coming back from the European Union on that. They're considering it. And there's several massive areas of commerce, such as goods, pharmaceuticals, medicines, oil that it buys, liquid natural gas products from the United States, energy products. They haven't touched that yet. Neither have they touched services, which is another massive sector of financial importance that the United States in essence, exports these services to the European Union. So this is a very, very graded response, carefully managed, step by step. That's what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, truly fascinating. And here's the reality. I mean, markets seem to have rebounded somewhat. It seems that, you know, there's a little bit of reprieve here. But from what I'm hearing, and based on what you're saying, the Europeans have many levers that they can pull, frankly, with the United States. And from our sense is you've got the global world trade order that is being rejigged, reworked completely. It seems like tariffs are here to stay. Are the Europeans prepared for that eventuality?
I think they're signaling that they are. They're signaling and saying that they're prepared for tough negotiations. They'd rather have a zero-to-zero tariff relationship with the United States, but that's something the United States has turned down. They say that they're ready for these negotiations to be tough. And the way that they're grading them, if you will, and sort of putting out the ones that have less economic impact first, although again, the point is they put those on a 90-day hold, that the way that they're stepping them out is designed to increase the pain slowly and over a period of time. So it was in early February that President Trump announced these 25% tariffs globally on aluminum and steel. It took until last week for the European Union to make a decision on that. So it is in this for the long game, careful, slow. And part of the messaging here, and we've talked about this before, is the European Union wants to send to its other trading partners a very clear signal that they're not going to be reactionary and do things quickly in the way that the United States has put these tariffs on, announced the tariffs, backtracked, gone backwards and forwards, mixed messages, unclear signals, uncertainty. Businesses hate that, right? What the European Union is trying to do here, not just in its response to the United States to send a message there, but to send it to other trading partners around the world, that they are consistent, that they are careful, that they are reliable, that they are stable. And so are they prepared for the long game? That's what they're signaling. And the markets are signaling that they're hunkering down for a longer game where they can get back into some positive territory. But I don't think anyone feels, particularly not in the EU in Brussels, that this is over by a long stretch.
Yeah, exactly. Let me tell you, I've covered markets long enough to know that every single country on the planet wants to increase its industrial capacity and export as much as possible. So frankly, you know, what the United States wants, everyone wants. Nick Robertson, great to have you with us. All right, so moving on to China, because it's the president there is responding to the Trump tariffs by working to build trade ties with some regional neighbors. Xi Jinping is on a three-nation tour of Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia, painting China as a stable, reliable partner in the global trade market. Stephen Jiang has the details for us.
Xi Jinping's message to Vietnam and indeed many other countries is to join hands with China to resist Trump's quote-unquote unilateral bullying and work together to maintain the current global free trade system and supply chains. Now, this is going to be repeated and amplified throughout his trip. The goals of his trip very much twofold. Economically, China trying to continue to diversify its footprint. And it's no coincidence he started in Hanoi because Southeast Asian countries as a bloc has replaced the U.S. and European Union as China's biggest trading partner, and Vietnam having the biggest share among all Southeast Asian nations. That's why Xi Jinping has signed 45 different deals and agreements with Vietnam, not only trying to sell a lot of products now being shut out of the U.S., but also trying to invest, helping Vietnam build infrastructure projects. And this is happening despite the long-running territorial dispute between the two countries in the South China Sea. So that really speaks to the second part of his goal, that is more strategic, more foreign policy related, with China trying to pull more and more countries closer to its orbit, even those that may have disputes with Beijing on major issues. The message here being, if you've been unsettled by the tariff whiplash from Washington, then come hang out with us. Instead of fear and pressure, as Trump has shown you, we are going to show you love. We are on your side. Now, this message perhaps a lot more resonant to a lot of countries compared to just a few weeks ago, as China continues to portray itself as the adult in the room with an intensifying trade war with Washington and trying to play the role of the upholder of international order and norms. And a lot of these countries, though, including Vietnam, have to be a little careful in terms of how they tread. They don't want to be perceived too close to Beijing and risk provoking Trump at a time when they still have to negotiate with the president on their pending tariffs. And the U.S. president very much noticing this meeting in Hanoi, characterizing it in his words as China and Vietnam figuring out how to screw the USA. Stephen Zhang, CNN, Beijing.